For this demonstration, I'm going to show you how to make touch powder. This antisocial chemical is extremely unstable and lashes out violently at anything that gets too close. In fact, it's so sensitive that just a tickle from the tip of a feather is enough to set it off spontaneously. The experiments you're about to see involve toxic chemicals and strong acids and are intended for educational and demonstrational purposes only. The fumes from breathing ammonia will make your eyes water and your nostrils burn, and large quantities of touch powder can blow your fingers off. So rather than trying these experiments for yourself, just sit back and safely enjoy these demonstrations while I take all the risks for you. With that being said, let's start this experiment with a bottle of household ammonia, a 1-pint bottle of 3% hydrogen peroxide, 2 ounces of iodide's tincture, and a little muriatic acid. Muriatic acid is typically used for cleaning concrete in swimming pools and is about 30% hydrochloric acid, which means you really don't want to spill any on you. Now to get started, we need a source of iodine, and I like these 2-ounce bottles of decolorized iodine, which are basically just mixtures of poisonous alcohols and ammonium and potassium iodides. And if decolorized iodine isn't available, this will work with regular iodine tinctures as well. Okay, let's get started by pouring the entire 2-ounce bottle of tincture into a tall glass container, like this flower vase I picked up from the dollar store. Once the liquid settles, we can look straight on from the side and mentally mark a line about twice as high as the fluid, then carefully double the volume with muriatic acid. You can see that mixing the two chemicals together releases a mysterious smoky white vapor, and unlike most of the chemicals in this experiment, this cloud of ammonium salt shouldn't hurt you. Just be mindful that the liquid in the vase is still a really strong acid, and you need a way to neutralize it in case any gets spilled accidentally. Alright, now that we've got a mixture of iodine and acid, let's go ahead and dump the entire bottle of hydrogen peroxide into the chemical soup, and check out what happens to the color as we do. The liquid goes from a pale yellow to an extremely deep purple, and you'll see why that happened in just a second. Let's give the mixture a good stir and let it sit for about 10 minutes so it all has time to fully react and settle down. And if you look closely, you should be able to see tiny purple particles precipitating out and sinking to the bottom. 10 minutes later, our liquid's turned red and we've got a mound of purple powder heaped in a pile at the bottom, and that's the stuff we're after. To get it out, we'll first need to pour off the reddish-brown liquid by slowly and carefully transferring it to another container. We could dispose of it down the toilet as well, but whatever we do, it's important to wear chemical-resistant gloves and make sure none of it splashes out accidentally. Alright, with all the liquid poured off, we've got ourselves a dirty gray sludge at the bottom of the container, and at this point, that wet slop is mostly elemental iodine mixed with a few impurities. So before going any further, let's give it a rinse with some water to help dilute the leftover acid and clean it up a bit. Now it's important we do this outside or in a fume hood because the vapor being released is toxic and will burn your nose and leave your eyes stinging. I like to give the mixture one more good stirring, then let it sit for another 10 minutes so the iodine has a chance to settle back to the bottom again. This time the water should be just about crystal clear and we can go ahead and dump it out the same way we did before. The stuff left behind is enough elemental iodine to make some very impressive demonstrations, and you should be aware that it's really nasty stuff and will stain your fingers if you get any on you, so it's important to use protection. This chemical sludge leaves ugly brown stains on anything it touches, and it's extremely difficult to clean up, so it's a good idea to work slowly and carefully and avoid making a mess in the first place. Now to transform these purple crystals into a paste of touch-sensitive explosives, all we need is a bit of household ammonia, and we won't need much. Use as little ammonia as possible, pouring it down the sides of the container to recapture as much of the iodine as you can. Then give the mixture a little swirl to keep the particles suspended, and quickly pour the solution into a small container like a 1-ounce condiment cup. Generally speaking, the less ammonia you have to use, the better, and the goal is to get all the iodine into a 1-ounce container like this. So if there's a bit of residue left behind, then simply add a touch more ammonia and swirl it around to salvage every last bit of it, and that's it. All we have to do now is let the mixture sit for a good 5 to 10 minutes so all the ammonia has a chance to soak in and combine with the iodine. The molecules quickly arrange themselves into compounds of nitrogen triiodide, which is relatively stable when it's soaked in ammonia and kept in the dark. But all that changes the instant it dries out. Now to prepare our touch-sensitive explosive for demonstrational purposes, we'll just need to pour off the ammonia. Most of the dark sludge will be left behind in the bottom of the cup, and if we scoop a bit of this volatile compound onto something like a concrete brick, it'll begin absorbing the moisture immediately, so we need to be extra careful from here on out. Now it can take anywhere from 5 minutes to 12 hours for the ammonia to evaporate completely, and you never really know when the powder's ready. But if it is, then something as simple and lightweight as a dried out leaf will be enough to trigger instant detonation with a loud, sharp snap. So what if we tried using something even softer, like the tip of a feather, to give it a little tickle? It's so sensitive, it still explodes into an amazing cloud of toxic purple smoke. In fact, nitrogen triiodide is so unstable that it can actually blow itself up just from its own weight. Leave it piled up like this for a few hours, and it's sure to detonate spontaneously with a loud, sharp snap when you're least expecting it. Now, to prevent that from happening, I typically use a plastic straw to spread the mixture as thin as practical, and sometimes shake the bricks from side to side to level it out even further, but only when the mixture's wet. You can tell it's wet if the surface is shiny and reflective, but there's always a small chance it could still blow up in your face. Touch powder needs to be treated with respect and kept well away from any body parts you think you might want to keep. I let this pile dry for over 8 hours, and there's a good chance it's primed and ready to explode now because it's not reflective anymore. Looking closer, you can actually see small glimmering crystals and craters embedded in the top as well, which kind of makes it look like the surface of a hostile alien planet. This is enough gunk to make over 10 fairly impressive demonstrations, and there's really no good reason anyone should make a batch this big by itself, but I'll blow this one up in a minute simply so you can appreciate the power. In the meantime, I rounded up these 3 bricks for 3 more touch-sensitive demonstrations, and I love these straws for transporting the wet mix into position because the tongues are lightweight and flexible and super efficient for making sure nothing gets left behind. I spread the batches of exploding paste thinly on the bricks, then let them sit out to dry in a controlled environment for the rest of the afternoon. Alright, check this out. If we try dropping a plastic purple grasshopper onto one of the batches, it gets blasted all the way across the room, and look how it got stained that ugly brown color I was telling you about earlier. Next, I made one of the 5-pointed popsicle bombs from a previous video and gently tossed it onto another batch, and just like that, it's gone. That's an incredible amount of power. Now, just for fun, what do you think would happen if we tried shooting a batch with a rubber band? Yep, as expected, the target explodes into a rolling cloud of purple dust. The purple cloud is a mixture of nitrogen gas, ammonium iodide, and iodine dust, which is the stuff that'll eventually settle down and stain your workspace an ugly purple-brown color. And we're not done making a mess yet because we still have our big batch standing by for detonation. For this last experiment, let's see how nitrogen triiodide reacts to laser light. Watch near the bottom of the brick and you'll see I've got a purple laser dot slowly moving upward. And just like that, the whole pile detonates the second the light touches it. How amazing is that? Well, now you know how simple off-the-shelf chemicals could be used to make an unstable and explosive batch of touch powder, but that doesn't mean you should. Making, possessing, or transporting nitrogen triiodide is probably illegal where you live unless you have a special explosives permit for it. Not to mention, touch powder is so unstable that there's really no practical way to use it in the real world, except for mad science demonstrations like this. Well, that's it for now. If you like this experiment, perhaps you'll like some of my others. Check them out at thekingofrandom.com.